This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What's up, Detroit sports fans? Welcome to the Fan Report show made by fans, for fans, powered by the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I'm Nick, and joining us is our boy Andrew's going to give us this week's topics.
Oh, another week, another Lions loss. Some weird things going on in this game. We'll talk about them. And the Pistons, they wrapped up their preseason in fun fashion, to be honest with you. We'll close the book on that and talk about our expectations for the regular season, which starts in just a couple days as we're recording this podcast. It's Fan Report.
I feel like saying another Lions loss is just like, I feel like we sound like a broken record. Another week, another Lions loss. Another week, another Lions loss. I feel like I've been saying this for...
I mean, they sprinkle in some wins here and there.
But I feel like I hear that sentence over and over again in my head for the last, like, every week for 20 years. Like, I feel like it never goes away. The Lions officially were eliminated from the playoffs today with their loss to Tennessee in blowout fashion. We're all shocked today, and I guess later or earlier on this week, by that I mean like yesterday and even Friday a little bit, to see the news that Matthew Stafford was trying to play and they were leaning on playing him and moving forward with that. And ever since I saw the original news report come out that he was trending towards playing, I went, why? Like, what do they have to play for at this point to justify putting an injured Matthew Stafford, who has rib cartilage issues, in this game? Like, what is the justification for playing him? You couldn't have anything better than a 500 record. That wasn't going to be good enough to make the playoffs. You were literally a half game out, or I think technically a full game out, from being eliminated. What was the point?
There was no point. There was no point at all, except for some delusion that either some delusion that you were still going to make the playoffs, or it was Stafford trying to be the toughest guy in the room. I don't know which one it was.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is maybe, just maybe, they were thinking, okay, Stafford's trade stock is taking a big hit this year. Maybe if we can continue to get him in a game against a soft defense, that he can have a good game, and we can turn around some of that trade stock and get as much as we can for him.
Or you can further hurt him and tank the trade stock.
That's like, it just did not make sense. And I wonder how much the Lions brass, I can't really even say front office anymore because it's been decimated, but how much the Lions brass made that call as much as Stafford did. I know Darrell Bevell's playing for a job or coaching for a job right now. Stafford may be trying to play for a job. That's the other justification for it. But did Stafford make this call?
I wonder if that plays a part in it. Is part of this Darrell Bevell just basically trying to get wins to basically still audition for another job elsewhere, assuming we're not really looking at him seriously? I don't know.
I think it's him trying to audition for a job elsewhere, probably a coordinator position, or maybe even if he gets lucky, a head coaching position.
We knew that's what these last 5 games were going to be, but I wonder if he would risk Matthew Stafford's health like that to pretty up his resume a bit.
I mean, if he thinks he's not going to be here next year, and which is kind of already written on the wall, does it really matter to him?
Yeah, but still, I don't feel like even if he did want to, I don't think this would have been Darrell Bevell's decision at the end of the day. I think at the end of the day, it's Stafford's decision if he plays or not. It's like, I don't know how much I can on this.
Right, and I definitely can understand Stafford trying to play for a job here. Like he's sitting there thinking, okay, you know, they're looking at me potentially not being the quarterback for this team next year, and if I'm not, I want to have a job elsewhere. Yeah, I want teams to be interested in me, but also if they are potentially looking at me to be the quarterback of this team next year, I want to prove that I can do it. So I want to prove that I can be here and still win games and be an effective quarterback. So I want to give them a reason to believe in me. So I'll come in and play even though I'm hurt, and maybe with the matchup the way it is, maybe I'll have a good game and things will go well. But in the grand scheme of things, it didn't make sense from any front as to why you would play him. This team is not trying to win a ton of football games right now. At least they shouldn't be. The Jets are a good example of what not to do after their win against the Rams. Now pushes them out of the Trevor Lawrence spot. Right now for the Lions, it's your season's done. And obviously today that's literally true because they are eliminated from the playoffs, but mathematically speaking, but your season is done. Winning football games right now does not help you. I get there's guys in the team that are playing for jobs that probably or may not be here next year, and they're trying to earn their spots. The Jelani Tavais, the Jared Davises of the world, the Deshaun Hands of the world. They're playing for jobs and roster spots, either on this team or another. So I get it from that perspective. But again, playing Stafford just didn't make sense to me. It's
pointless. We were going to get blown out. We're like, why not just try out Chase Daniel? Get blown out. Like, the outcome was the same at the end of the day. Like,
and you didn't risk further injury.
Even playing Stafford, you weren't winning this football game.
Likely not.
Here's the question, though. Do you think Matthew Stafford finishes out the season then?
At this point, yeah. I have no reason to believe otherwise. I don't understand why he would. Rest those ribs, man. You got to get healthy.
Yeah.
This is yet another year where an injury has plagued him in some way, shape, or form. What's this now? 4 straight seasons? He had the 2 back injuries. He had that, what was it, a thumb or an index finger injury the one year?
Yeah, I remember that.
And then it was an index finger. Was that 4 years ago or was that 5 years ago?
That was 5 years ago.
5 years ago? Okay. Then maybe
if
4
not
in the
more.
last 5. It might have been longer than that. I don't know. But either way, the guy has been often injured. And this season, he just hasn't looked right at all for much of the year.
But like in his defense, like, I don't think he was injured at all. Like, at least nothing that was impeding him other than now with the rib injury. I think he was generally fine most of the year.
Well, didn't he have a hand injury this year that he ended up having to wear something on one of his hands? I think it might have been his offhand.
It hampered him for like a game, but I think he was fine after that.
Okay.
Anyway, but yeah, it's just like I said, I'm curious to see if they play him for the rest of the year, and I thought that his year was pretty obviously done, and now I'm thinking otherwise. It doesn't make sense to me, but I guess it is what it is.
Do you want to see the Lions play the spoiler role for a team like the Vikings that could potentially hop into the playoffs? Maybe.
I mean, it's a fun role to play, but no, because if we spoil it, that just hurts us more than anything.
Right. You're not wrong. It does hurt us more than anything because it would push us further away from a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Are the Vikings technically still on the bubble?
From a high pick, you mean, not from a playoff spot.
Sorry, high pick. No, I think the Vikings are out of it now.
Are they?
I think so, because I believe they lost today, didn't they? They were 6-8 going into this game, right? Or are they 6-8 now? How many games do we have left? They're 6-8 now.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're technically not out of it.
Yeah.
But they're pretty damn close.
Yeah, it's not great.
Right. They're 2 games back of the Cardinals at this point, who would be the final playoff team. I mean, again.
Yeah, they need a win today because them and the Bears are kind of really battling it out in the bubble, and they would have needed a win today. I think them losing today.
They lost today to the Bears, by the way.
Yeah. It's the same thing. I think them losing today,
it pretty much seals it
unless. Because who the Bears have left? That's what I need to know.
Bears schedule?
Yeah, they got the Jags, who will take care of easily, but they actually probably will lose to the Packers unless the Packers have the have home field advantage clinched by then. They'll sit their guys. I don't know, but
which I don't think they do. I think they've got it. They've got the lead right now by a game over the Saints after the Saints just lost to the Chiefs, so they could technically have it clinched at that point, but we'll see.
Yeah. I love how we're so tired of the Lions that we're talking about the other NFC North teams' playoff chances.
Right. I mean,
dude, I don't think I think this is the most checked out of a game I've been all season.
Oh, same. It was fantasy reasons to watch. Yeah, that was it. You paid attention for fantasy reasons.
About what was happening on the field.
Because obviously right now it's semifinals. It's the semifinals of your fantasy season, or you're doing DFS and you're looking to pick up some more cash. So you paid attention for guys like Derrick Henry playing well, Ryan Tannehill, AJ Brown, Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, Marvin Jones. The names to play well. I mean, what can we expect here? Is I guess there's been. All right, let me start over. I'm going to kind of fast forward here into the offseason because obviously the Lions are in the midst of a GM search, and they're doing things kind of half right in the sense of they're actually looking for a GM as opposed to actively looking for a coach first.
Yeah.
They brought in Chris Spielman and amongst other names, Chris Spielman and Barry Sanders, Mark Hollis and Rod Graves and Mike Disner to be advisors to the GM search. So Chris Spielman's the one who's got an actual title. He's a full-time advisor, special assistant to the chairman, president, CEO. So he's a special assistant to Rod Wood. So how do you, before we get into some of the candidates that have been mentioned, how do you feel about Chris Spielman being a heavily influencing advisor into the search for the GM for this franchise?
No, I mean, there's nothing not to like about it. I mean, my whole worry with this front office and the GM search is we don't have football people in this front office. Wood himself has said he's not a football guy. Sheila's clearly not a football person. So having a guy like Chris Spielman,
she does. Yeah. She claims she is.
I mean, either she was being coy in her press conference, or she was lying,
or she has no idea what the hell she's talking about. Right.
And I'll give you. And so I do like getting a guy like Chris Spielman. I like getting any football guy in to help with football related things, especially something like as important as a GM search. Let me give you a quote from him. I want to see what you make of it. But this is kind of the reason why I like him here. He said, this is from ESPN, by the way. Everybody has to understand the direction that we're going. Everybody has to know what our culture is, and we can't waver from that culture. Everybody has to know, okay, what type of character do we want in the building? And from everybody on down, everybody understands how the head coach and general manager have to be in unison. They can fight and argue, which is healthy, but I'll tell you this. If I have any say, there's going to be unity. It's not going to be an us versus them. You can't build a winning culture in us versus them.
I mean, I obviously agree with that. We've been asking for how long for the Pistons to develop a culture and an identity and to have a semblance of who they are, and that people knew that when they're going into their building, you know what you're going to get there. And the Lions in my lifetime, I can't remember the last time they've had that type of identity. I mean, you had a somewhat of an identity of that we're going to play dirty, we're going to play rough mentality and identity, but it only to an extent. You didn't have an identity under Matt Patricia. Players didn't buy into what identity they tried to come in and put in there, and to what culture they had there. So it didn't work out. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with it. It's something that every successful team needs. You need to have a culture. You need to have an identity. You need to have a unifying scenario in the front office and in the locker room for the team to be successful. You can't have no togetherness. You can't have no cohesiveness. You have to have, no identity will never be successful. There has to be some semblance of one. And in all honesty, it kind of has to be rock solid to be successful, because that's what you base your organization on. That's what you build your roster around. That's how you coach your football team. That's step one of being successful in a professional. I can't even just say the NFL. It's all professional sports franchises, professional sports leagues. An identity is important, and a culture is important.
And like Chris Spielman said, you can't build the identity has to start from the top down. You have to have a plan. You have to have a set plan from the general manager down to the coach, down to the players. And the plan can't be, let's just be the New England Patriots. That cannot be the plan.
Clearly, that has not worked. And in all honesty, if I'm the advisors and Rod Wood and I'm in Sheila Ford and I'm interviewing candidates for my GM or coaching positions, I would look through their history, their job history. And if it has anything to do with the Patriots, I'd throw the resume out and I'd go next candidate. I would get so far away from the Patriot way that you can't. The thing is, in the NFL, you can't build your organization around like the same way another team did. You have to build your own identity. You can't model the way that the Cardinals did things. You can't model the way that the Patriots did things or the Ravens. You have to build things yourself in your own identity with your own pieces and your own mindset and your own culture. Mimicking somebody else will not be successful anywhere else besides where it originated.
Now, Spielman did mention about this thing. He did mention saying, like, if I have any say, there's going to be unity. I'm still trying to figure that out in terms of, does he mean like unity between the front office and coaching, or unity between coaching and players? Because that's really the issue was these past few seasons is the coaches and the players were kind of butting heads. Like I feel like the GM and the coaches are kind of on the same side here.
Well, we did hear reports that Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn had big arguments about who to draft in the
there was that.
The draft.
Right.
There may not have been always on the same page with things, and we just didn't hear as much about it because, well, the GM just never talked. So if there's one thing I hope the Lions get out of a GM, it's a guy who's not afraid to face the media. I want somebody who's willing to be vocal, willing to face the media, and willing to say, hey, this is the situation, and this is what we're going to do to either fix it or continue to be successful.
I agree with that. When was the last time we had a GM willing to face the media? Was it Millen?
I don't even know. Stan Van Gundy.
Oh, I'm talking about the Lions.
I know. I mean, I think in terms of unity, he means in the building of the Lions offices in general. I think he means unity between the players and coaching, unity between the coaches and between the coach and GM and the GM and the heads of the organization. I think there just needs to be a unity across the entire franchise, and that's what he's talking about. Because without unity, you won't be able to build an identity or a culture. Yeah. And again, that's so incredibly important to be successful in this league.
And I also do want to bring up, we did talk about, I believe it was last week, when Sheila Ford Hamp had come out and said that they are looking for established GMs and coaches. Rob Wood came out, and he was quoted. Rod Wood came out, and he was quoted as saying, "Experience is a factor, but it's not a determinant. It's not going to be a prerequisite for this search."
Good.
That's going to ask you. Does that quell your worries a little bit?
No, yes, it does. Granted, I don't want Rod Wood being the guy that makes the decisions here because, again, he's not a football guy. It does make me feel a little bit better that an experienced GM is not something that's of utmost importance, that it's not a deal breaker. It's not, I honestly would rather a guy getting his first shot as a GM, someone who's a well-known assistant GM who's kind of come up through the ranks in another organization that has been successful. I'd like to see him get a shot or her get a shot. I don't care who it is.
Yeah.
I just want somebody that has a plan and has an idea of what they want to do, and it doesn't have to do with, hey, I'm going to copy up someone else's homework.
Exactly.
I want someone that wants to come in and set their own identity and bring in their own guys and their own mindsets and their own coaches and run things the way they want to run it. And if that's a guy who they're picking up off the street and has never had experience in the league, but he knows what the hell he's talking about, sure. If it's a guy who was an assistant GM or player personnel or a scouting director somewhere else, sure. I don't love the idea of bringing in a retread GM. Is it something that could be successful with the right name? Yes. And I know we've talked about John Dorsey before. I've soured on it a little bit, thinking about, okay, how much does he want this? Is he going to be willing to evolve with the way the league is of today, considering he hasn't been in a job in how long? Why was he unemployed? That's the other thing you got to worry about. So just because you have GM experience in this league does not mean that you should be put to the front of the line as to who we pick to be our GM. We should be interviewing every single candidate as if they have no experience and say, hey, experience can play a factor, sure. But at the same time, I don't want a retread here. I don't think it's a good idea. Retreads tend to get stuck in their old ways and not be willing to evolve. And
you bring up a great point. I want to take a swing for the fences here. I'm not looking to just get back to 9-7. I'm even though I know we're not close to to going past that right now, I want someone who can get us there and then get us past. And I think the way to do that is to take risks on some guys. You took a risk on Matt Patricia. It didn't pan out. That should not discourage you from continuing to take risks.
Now, with that being said, though, the biggest names we have heard coming out as potential GM candidates have been retreads. Fun fact, outside of one in particular. Some of the names, and I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on some of them. One of them in particular, Jerry Reese, Giants GM from 2007 2017. So he has won a Super Bowl. Hasn't had an interview scheduled, but the Lions have said that they are interested in bringing in Jerry Reese, or for an interview, I should say. How do you feel about Jerry Reese being the future GM of this organization? No. Yeah, I'm straight up a no. I can't stand the idea of Jerry Reese.
Yeah, he won a Super Bowl, but then he ran the organization to the ground after that.
Ran the organization into the ground, and also, by the way, his drafting is garbage. Yeah. He has not drafted well since like 2010. Another name, another retread, Rick Smith, Texans GM from 2006-2017, drafted guys like Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins. There are some names in there that he has drafted. How do you feel about Rick Smith?
Rick Smith I actually don't hate. I think he got the Texans to a really good spot, and I don't think that, like, if he was still there that he would have blown it up. I think DeAndre Hopkins would probably still be there. I mean, it's completely unfounded speculation, but I feel like if you brought him in, you'd probably keep him there. I didn't see any major missteps with Rick Smith, although I've been following the Texans that closely. It's definitely a step up from Jerry Reese. So if we're going to go retread, you could do worse than Rick Smith. I don't hate the idea, but I would still prefer to take a swing on a guy who could do even better. But I don't like Rick Smith has enough pros for me to like it.
There are some pros with Rick Smith. He did kind of turn that Texans organization into something that's obviously very relevant. The one big knock that I have with Rick Smith, though, is his drafting outside of the first round in particular is not great. Like by not great, I mean not good. Like he's very solid at getting the first round pick right. Very solid at that. But beyond that, clearly, he struggles to find the guys in the later rounds. He's not successful at doing that. And that's something that here in the Lions organization, with the way the roster is made up, we're going to need to find guys in later rounds because there's so many positions we have to fill here. So is Rick Smith my first choice? No. Do I hate it?
No, not at all.
No, not really. Yeah. Like I don't hate it. I think he has some pedigree there.
I'm not going to be the guy that's up in arms if we sign Rick Smith. It's
right. I won't be overly excited about it, though. Because, again, like I said, he does not draft well outside of the first round. Great first-round drafter. But beyond that, woof. Moving on to another one, Thomas Dimitroff, Falcons GM from 2008-2020, and also Patriots Director of College Scouting from 03 to 07.
Oh, boy.
How do you feel about Thomas Dimitroff?
I mean, again, you got another guy who built a really good team in Atlanta. The thing with Thomas Dimitroff is like, I don't know. It's the way he built the Atlanta Falcons. It's not, at least to me, it's not the ideal way to build a football team. Like it felt like he built that team from the outside in. I mean, like yes. you got your quarterback, receiver, and then he neglected the trenches, neglected the running back, basically neglected the defense. Like
they have had pretty bad defenses through the years.
So I don't know if he has a track record of a lot of winning seasons under him, Super Bowl appearance under him. I just don't know if I probably would. Yeah, I don't think I love it, to be honest with you.
He's a big, fat no thank you for me. Don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out kind of a situation. Reason being, he left the Atlanta Falcons in a hole of like $38 million against their salary cap going into next season. They are over the salary cap by like almost 40 mil, if not more. Like it's a ridiculously terrible situation for the Atlanta Falcons, who are a bad football team right now, mind you, with just they have I believe the worst salary cap situation in the NFL right now. I want no part of that because he was the conductor of that, and I want zero to do with that here in Detroit because that would put this organization, push us back another half decade because we know we can't recover from that. So I'll straight up no thank you on Thomas Dimitroff. No way, no how. So moving into some guys that aren't retreads that have been either brought in for an interview or are potential guys we could bring in for an interview. One of them being Louis Riddick, a name we've mentioned before. He's the ESPN analyst and a Monday Night Football commentator. He previously has been the director of pro personnel for the Eagles in 2010 to 2013, as well as Washington 2005-2007. They did interview him on December 18th. How do you feel about Louis Riddick potentially coming in to be the GM of the Lions? He has been a hot button name. A lot of fans are interested in it. He is the hot name, but what are your thoughts?
So that's what I'm still trying to figure out. Like I get it. I like having football guys there. And Louis Riddick is clearly a football guy. There is something I like about analysts because they get exposed to every team on a constant basis. They're always watching games. They're always watching, you could say they're always watching film, basically. And they take in a lot of football information. But it's like on that alone, I'm like, okay, cool. He could be someone that could be nice. I don't understand the major hype for Louis Riddick, though. Like, why
he's
are
always
all
a big
fans
name
so
every
excited?
single time there's a GM opening, and it's because he's a face that everybody knows.
Exactly. It's like Chris Spielman. I don't think I want him as a GM. I would love him as an advisor. I don't. There's nothing I can hang on to other than he's a football guy to make me think he's going to be a great GM.
And that's exactly how I feel about it. Also, he's a football guy, and we do need football guys. That is something that we do need here. But at the same time, nothing about Louis Riddick jumps out to me that says, "Oh, this guy's going to be a great GM in this league." He's the hot name because he's a face people know and people recognize. That's one of the reasons why Matt Millen was a hot name when the Lions brought him in. It's not something that I'm overly excited or interested in. It's just not. I don't know if he's got the chops to be a GM. Why wouldn't he have already been one by now? I get that the ESPN analyst position is a cushy job and it's not one you necessarily want to leave. But if he really had the drive to be a GM in this league, why hasn't he been one already? What's the detractor there? What stopped him in the past? Is it because he doesn't interview well? Is it because he may not be as good of a candidate as we thought? Or is it because he just doesn't want to? And at that point, I'd be worried about him always having one foot out the door and not totally buying in. So while Louis Riddick is a football guy, and that's a name that's obviously the number one key quality I need for my GM, and he's a guy who is clearly very knowledgeable, he isn't my favorite candidate for a multitude of reasons. Next name is Terry Fontenot. He's currently the Saints vice president and assistant general manager of pro personnel. He obviously can't be interviewed until the end of the regular season, so there's no scheduled interview yet. The Falcons are potentially going to be interviewing him at the end of the season as well. But I believe the Lions are also interested. How do you feel about Terry Fontenot as a potential GM candidate?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Haven't heard of him before you just mentioned him. But just thinking about the position you just said he's in, you look at the Saints roster and judging from what you're saying, he's probably had a key role in getting that and putting that roster together, being director of scouting, getting the young guys in. That's a team that's been just perennially good for the last 15
Assistant
years.
general manager of pro personnel is what he is.
So I can't confirm that he's an eye for talent, but it sounds like he has a good eye for talent, just judging from how good the Saints have been in terms of just getting players in there and continuously drafting well and continuously being on top of the NFL.
They've had success for a long time now. Yeah.
So apparently this is from SNY TV. Apparently after Ryan Pace left in 2015 to become the Bears GM, Fontenot, even though he kept that same title, he actually had more of a voice in that front office. And he had told NOLA.com that year that Mickey Loomis and Coach Sean Payton really like for us to be cohesive, for us to blend. So that's what they were doing. And so he got to do a lot of college stuff and a lot of pro stuff. So it does sound like he had an elevated role the past few years in bringing guys in and really got both the college scouting side and the pro scouting side under his belt. Now, if you look at the drafts of the last 5 years, that's some pretty good names, too. I believe Alvin Kamara was 2015, wasn't he?
I believe so. I mean, yes, the drafting history for the Saints in recent years is obviously very successful. They've gotten a lot of great names. There are a lot of really good everyday players that have been extremely successful for the Saints. And it's a big reason why they've managed to sustain success. And Terry Fontenot should be...
Kamara was 2017.
So okay, continue. Still under him. Yeah. Terry Fontenot is a guy that, in my opinion, is honestly near the top of my list of candidates. Yeah. He is a part of an organization that has had extreme success for a long period of time. He's been involved in the building of that success. They know how to scout talent, bring it in, and also develop talent. And that tells me that there's a lot of knowledge that is passed through that front office, and he's probably got a lot of it. And Terry Fontenot being one of the orchestrators of that organization, Fontenot is one of those guys that I look at as being maybe not a guy that's experienced. He's not. He doesn't have a ton of experience or any experience as a GM, but he's a guy that's looking to cut his teeth as a GM somewhere, and I would love to see him come here and do it. Because, again, the Saints have been extremely successful throughout the years. They do draft well, and I would love to see him come in and do that for here in Detroit. Picking up a name that's like an assistant GM in an organization like New Orleans or an organization like Kansas City, that's something the Lions should be doing because there is sustained success there that we need to build on.
I mean, you look at just 2015 through 2017, his first 3 years with his quote-unquote expanded role. In 2015, they drafted 3 players that were multi-year starters for the organization. In 2016, they drafted 4 players that were multi-year starters. And in 2017, 4 players that are multi-year starters, including we're talking Pro Bowlers here too. We're talking Marshall Lattimore, talking Alvin Kamara, we're talking Ryan Ramczyk, Michael Thomas. These are all under his tenure as Anders Pete. So you got some big names. So it's clear that he does his job well. And again, I've said this multiple times in the show, one of the main traits that I look for in a general manager is an eye for talent, an ability to identify talent and know how to use talent. It looks like he's got this in spades. So I do like him as well.
Absolutely. Again, this is a guy that's pretty much right in line with what I want for a future GM of the Lions.
Yeah.
And the final name I wanted to bring up, going back to the analyst type name, or the analyst guy, is Scott Pioli, NFL Network and CBS analyst.
Interesting.
His previous jobs being Falcons assistant GM from 2014 to 2019, Chiefs GM from 2009 to 2012, and Patriots vice president of player personnel in 02 to 08. The interview is scheduled. It is this week. How would you feel about Scott Pioli being the Lions GM? I don't like that he's connected to the Patriots.
I'm pretty lukewarm on it, to be honest with you. I can't get any. I can't identify it. Like when he was with the Chiefs, they weren't great. Obviously, he had some good years with the Falcons, but I think he left before it all tanked since he left last year. But it's not one I love. I'll be honest.
It's really
with you.
not one I love either because, again, I don't want anybody connected to the quote-unquote Patriot way. The Chiefs weren't all that great when he was there. In fact, I don't even think they were any good. Let's find out. But in the Falcons situation, again, he was a guy who was there for the top, but at the same time...
It's the same reasons we don't like the GM from the Falcons.
Exactly. He was part of the... Actually, the Chiefs in 2010 went 10-6. They won the AFC West.
Did they?
Yes. But he was a part of the building of one of the worst salary cap situations in the NFL. And I want no part of that.
No, sir.
And then they finished in last place in the AFC West in the following year in 2011, 7-9. So, granted, 7-9 is still better than what we got now. But so again, that's more of the retread situation. And again, this is more of a situation of why isn't he a GM right now? If he's had recent experience as an assistant GM with what was a successful organization in the Falcons, why isn't he one right now? Why was nobody interested? And why is he just an analyst? So that's one where I would say no, thank you. I don't need I don't need you as a retread in your TV tie coming to be our GM.
It's like he had negative career growth in the last decade instead of positive. Any other ones?
That's all I got. Those are the names that I have seen here. Obviously, we have some internal candidates, but you and I will both say no thank you to an internal candidate.
I don't want anyone already associated with this organization.
Exactly.
We'll keep discussing it as things develop over the next few weeks, and it'll be on the forefront of this show. But moving on to the basketball happenings in this town.
Let's play some basketball.
The Pistons just finished their preseason. They had 2 games against the Wizards to close it out. Won one, lost one. Now, again, like we said last week, since it's preseason, a lot of the things that you see have to be taken with a grain of salt. But basically what I wanted to do here was I just wanted to get some high-level takeaways, not like dive too deep in the stats, like, oh, this person shot 32%. What does that mean? That's pointless to do when you're talking about a preseason game. But high-level takeaways in terms of the look of this team, the feel of this team, and how that has shaped our expectations going into this season. And do you want me to kick it off? Or do you wanna...
go right ahead.
All right. So one of the main things I noticed with this squad through the first 4 games is, and I don't want you to think I'm overselling it because I'm really not trying to compare them to this team. I'm just trying to. There's just this one little thing that I've seen that reminds me of this team. This team has a chip on their shoulder. Like the players on this team have a chip on their shoulder the way I haven't seen since that going to work crew. In terms of like these are a lot of these guys are cast-offs and are looking to prove themselves in the league, and they've all come together almost at the same time. And the reason I say that it's translating onto the floor. This team is scrappier than I've ever seen them be. This Pistons team, I should say. They're defensively more aggressive, smarter on the defensive end than I've seen them be. And it's translated numbers too. Now, take this with a grain of salt because 2 of these games are against the Knicks, but they're the only team in the preseason that hasn't allowed a team to score 100 points. But again, it's preseason and
it's preseason,
2 games against the Knicks.
2 games against the Knicks, and also 2 games against the Wizards, who are also not a good basketball team.
Yeah, well, they looked pretty nice with Russell Westbrook playing Game 4, but he only played a half.
Right.
Now, does that give you, in terms of the prospects for the regular season, does that make you optimistic about seeing a team that's at least improved defensively over what we've seen in recent years.
Yes, absolutely. Because again, this is what we were just talking about with the Lions. This is a team that looks to be actually building an identity, and we're going to win with defense. We're going to win by playing scrappy. This is a team of, like you mentioned, a bunch of cast outs that are coming together on with the same uniform, and they're going to be playing as hard as they can. A lot like the going to work crew was. That was a bunch of cast outs. Also, Chauncey was a journeyman. Ben Wallace was not really a big name center at all. He played for the Washington Bullets and the Washington Wizards for a while, and he was kind of pushed around the league a little bit until he ended up in Detroit and became the star that he was. Rip Hamilton was almost a bust for the Wizards to a certain extent. So seeing this situation where these guys, and I'm not saying that this is the way that the Pistons are going to look when they want to start winning, because I really don't think it is. There's going to be a very different looking team. But there may be names in this team that are involved in the future in this franchise. And in fact, I hope there are, and I think there are. I have some excitement with the way that this team plays. They are playing with a defensive mindset, with a you aren't going to get around me that easily type deal. And if you do, I'm going to make you pay for it. You know, they play physical. They play scrappy. I like that a lot.
They had some hard fouls. I'm like, this is the bad boys? What is going on?
It's good we finally see that. I want to see that type of scrappy mentality that if you go to the lane, well, it's going to hurt. Make them pay for getting by you. Don't give it up easy. Some things I've seen that you can take either way. Jeremy Grant looks to be a guy who's going to be around the ball constantly.
Yes.
And that's something that we kind of expected, but he's done it even more so than I would have expected.
Yeah. I'd like to see him be a little less of a ball stopper than he was the
I
preseason,
would tend to agree. I do want to see him kind of spread the ball around a little bit more because, again, he's not the greatest shooter, and evidence has shown that in the preseason so far. His shot hasn't really fallen just yet. Killian Hayes, another one. He is a guy who's going to be around the ball a lot, facilitating the offense. I'd like to see the shot falling a little bit more, which was a big worry for us when we took him, as the shot wasn't there. He's got good form. It just doesn't fall. And so I'm hoping Killian Hayes can find a way to get that to fall. Work with the shooting coaches. Maybe he's got to tweak something minor and build some of that confidence. Get that shot to fall. Because as soon as it does, he's lethal. And one guy who's honestly been one of the brightest spots in this preseason for me has been Josh Jackson.
Yes.
Watching him play is actually exciting.
Yes.
And this is the Josh Jackson you and I both were excited about coming into this team. And could this be the resurgence of his career? Could he finally live up to the expectations that he had coming into the league? He's a Swiss Army knife, like we said. He does everything on the floor, can guard any position on the floor, and he does it all. He can spread the ball around. He can shoot the ball. He can drive the lane. He can play defense and rebound the ball, and that's what he's been doing for the Pistons. And I hope to see that continue because I'd love to see this guy develop into a part of this organization of the future. If we can turn him into a key piece on this organization, because he's another guy that plays very scrappy and with a chip on his shoulder, and he does have something to prove, and I want to see him continue to play like it. So Josh Jackson's been one that's really exciting for me.
You talk about Killian Hayes, and I want to talk about him as well, and I agree 100%. Shot looks good, just got to fall. It looked he probably had his best shooting night of the preseason last night against the Wizards. He went 4 for 11, which is still not great, but it's better than what he was shooting.
Let's call it what it is. It's not good. It's bad.
But one thing I want to see from on the offensive side of the ball, I think I touched on this a little bit last week too. I just need to see a little more assertiveness out of him in the fact that, like, there were a few plays over the last couple games where you would see him drive to the lane on a pick and roll to draw defenders in would have been the goal of the play and dish it out. And that's exactly what he did. He would draw a defender in, but he'd have the defender beat, and he'd have a lane to the rim, but he'd still kick it out. But I'm like, all right, cool, you can make that play, but it happens so often. I'm like, why is he being so passive on the rim? Like, just attack it, like, go for it. And he ended up doing that a little bit in the last game. He finally took a few shots on the rim. He had one floater that went in, but he missed most of the time. But yeah, I just want to see him be a little more assertive, because that's how you become a threat in the pick and roll, is when you become assertive and getting that shot to fall too, but becoming assertive offensively too. You make yourself more of a threat because it entices defenses to collapse on you. But on the defensive side of the ball, specifically last game when Russell Westbrook was actually playing, I was actually really looking forward to see how Killian Hayes would hold his own against Russell Westbrook. And he played about Killian Hayes played about, I want to say 8 or 9 minutes in the first quarter, and then he didn't see the floor in the second quarter. He didn't come out till the beginning of the third. So, and since Russ only played the first half, we only got that small sample size of about like 8, 9 minutes of Russ on Killian Hayes. And I'll be honest with you, he held his own. He actually looked really good, stayed in front of Russ. I think Russ only got 1 bucket on him. Oh, no, it wasn't a bucket. Sorry, it was free throws. He got 2 points on him off free throws. But I was actually really happy to see that that Hayes did not shy away, and he really played up on Russ, and I like to see that. Obviously, I want to see it over an extended period rather than just an 8-minute sample. But I did see a lot of positives in that final game despite the loss. My biggest takeaway, other than Josh Jackson, that's probably is my big takeaway. I really liked what I've seen from Sekou Doumbouya, even though he kind of tapered off a little bit towards the end. But
I was actually just about to ask you, does the tapering off of Sekou Doumbouya worry you at all?
It worries me in terms of consistency. Like, I'm happy because now he's starting to understand, and we're starting to see what he's actually capable of being.
Well, we have seen it before. When he first came into the league, we did see flashes of it, and then we saw it disappear almost entirely. So, was that game another one of those splash in the pans where he has just a random really good game and then he disappears for God knows how long? And there is cause for worry about that. You know, we've seen this before with him, but are you worried about that potentially continuing?
No, because, I'm worried about it continuing, but if I had to put my money on it, I would say a lot of that was also the product of the team that was around him. I do think that this team will bring out a little bit more out of Sekou. So there's part of me that's cautiously optimistic about what Sekou can do this season, but I'm always worried about the inconsistency, especially just in the preseason. He was already inconsistent. Like, obviously, I'm worried about that, but I should say I'm optimistic based on who's around him now that they can bring more out of him.
The things I'm worried about, and this goes beyond just Sekou Doumbouya, but the preseason is the time you get guys that are developing involved. It's the time where guys like Killian Hayes can play 20 minutes a game, and guys like Saddiq Bey should be playing 20 minutes a game. But Saddiq Bey, not even 3 minutes in their final preseason game.
Yeah.
Sekou Doumbouya, only 13 and a half minutes in the final preseason game.
Saddiq averaged just under 12 minutes per game.
Which is something that does worry me, because that's a guy that we looked at as saying, okay, he could be a part of the future of this franchise. And Sekou not really getting many minutes either. He's a little bit more up there. He's probably looking at potentially a bench rotation spot with this team. But Isaiah Stewart, next to no minutes also in the preseason. And that's another guy we spent a first round pick on that really didn't get to see any time. So
Isaiah Stewart basically just came out in garbage time most of the time.
Yes, and so that is something I'm a little bit worried about.
In the final preseason game, this is what I found interesting. He tried it out, Isaiah Stewart, at the end of the game when it was a 2-point game, had Isaiah Stewart out there to close out the game for the final few minutes. So
granted, it's preseason, and we're not really trying to win these games as much as we are trying to develop these guys. But
that's what I'm saying. So I don't know if it was I'm playing Isaiah Stewart at the end of the game, every game, no matter what, or let's see if Isaiah Stewart can hold up in an actual pressure situation. I don't know what the thought process was behind that. I don't want to read into it too much, but I agree with you that I would have liked to see a little more playing time from 6 minutes per game in the preseason for a first-round pick. I think you want to see a little more.
If I had to put my money on it, I'd bet you guys like Saddiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart will probably spend a lot of time in the G League this year.
I think Saddiq Bey is going to be a solid part of the rotation, personally.
I don't. Just from what I've seen in terms of the trend with the way that he's been utilized. And also, you got to remember who's probably in front of him in this rotation, too, at his position. And that's the other reason why I'm not entirely sure that Saddiq Bey is going to carve out a huge piece of this rotation right away. He may not
a huge piece, but I actually do think what you saw in preseason, probably a little less than that. I could see 9 to 10 minutes a game for Saddiq.
I don't know that we even see that, and that's why I'm kind of leading towards him being in the G League, because you look at the rotation here, guys like Sekou Doumbouya, Svi Mikhailuk, Josh Jackson, those guys are going to be in front of him. And that's
Svi will probably. I don't think we'll see Svi at the 2, but or at the 3. I think he'll stay at the 2. But you're right. But I think
may
Jeremy
play
Grant,
more small ball there. Jeremy Grant, obviously in front of him. Blake Griffin in front of him.
Josh Jackson has played is proven that he should be in front of him.
Right. And I do think that there's guys in the rotation that are going to be in front of him, and I think Sekou definitely has the spot in front of Saddiq Bey. He'd probably have to take that rotation spot away from Saddiq Bey if he wants to get into this rotation in any shape or form, because
I think you see a lot of Sekou at the 4.
You very well could. Yeah. Absolutely. You very well could. But either way, there's not a ton of room in this rotation for a guy like Saddiq Bey. It's the end of the bench type situation, or a guy that gets scratched occasionally. So I think it would be better for him if he did start in the G League, and if he starts to cut his teeth a little bit and develop, then maybe you bring him up and put him in the rotation as a 10 to 12 minute a game guy and see what he does. I'd love to see that. Because again, this year's about development for me. I don't need to see what guys like Ja Okafor bring to the table, or Mason Plumlee or Wayne Ellington. I don't need to see that. Yeah. Hell, I don't even see what Derrick Rose brings to the table, because it doesn't matter to me outside of anything but a trade piece. So guys like that, I'd love to see Isaiah Stewart, Saddiq Bey, Sekou Doumbouya, Svi Mikhailiuk. I want to see those guys playing and getting opportunity. So... But again, it does worry me a little bit that we saw the minutes for guys like Isaiah Stewart and Saddiq Bey really dip down and not really get an opportunity in the preseason. Even Sekou Doumbouya, I would have liked to see get more opportunity in the preseason. It seems to me like the rotation's going to really be a 9-10 man rotation. It doesn't seem like it's going to go too far beyond that, really. Jeremy Grant, Blake Griffin, Plumlee, DeLon Wright, Killian Hayes, Josh Jackson, Svi Mikhailiuk, Sekou, Ja Okafor, Derrick Rose. And that's probably going to be just about it.
Yeah, he had a pretty Casey had a pretty solid 12-man rotation going for the preseason. Outside of the guys coming in at garbage time like Saban Lee, Isaiah Stewart, he had a pretty solid 12-guy rotation. But again, I do think that's mainly trying to test out guys for preseason. So I agree with you. I think you see about a 10-man rotation for this team. I don't think, at least I hope, Wayne Ellington won't factor in too much. I just don't see much upside of giving him a ton of playing time.
No, I really don't either. Outside of maybe you get a trade piece out of it. Maybe you end up, if he ends up having a solid year, you can turn him around and get some draft capital out of it in a package deal, or maybe even a second round pick or something. I don't know. But worst comes to worst. I mean, if he doesn't factor in, I mean, it doesn't really matter, because guys like Saddiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart don't play the same position, so it doesn't matter, But it's a rotation spot that can be given to someone else. I don't know. But
no, I agree.
Again, I don't expect this team to win a ton of games. I really don't even want this team to win a ton of games, because I would love to see us get another high draft pick and bring in a guy who could potentially be our star. I do think that this team is truly missing still its star. I think that's the one thing this team is still missing right now, is the big name guy, your number one scorer that can get to the basket and make plays by himself. I think Killian Hayes can be a secondary guy to that and can score the ball, but also is a great facilitator. There's a lot to like there, and I'd love to see him facilitating the ball to a guy that is an elite level scorer. So I would love to see the Pistons be able to get into a spot where they could potentially grab one of those.
One other high level takeaway, and we said after the offseason that on paper, this team looks like it will be improved offensively, but be pretty devoid of improved defensively, but be pretty devoid of offense. Pistons were, in terms of total offense, dead last in the league in terms of points per game in the preseason at 94 points per game. Do you think that's going to be pretty? Are we still confident it's going to be pretty indicative of what we see in the regular season, where this team is going to be pretty devoid of offense?
I won't say this is a dead last offense, because I think as guys like Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose and Jeremy Grant really start to fire things up, you will see an uptick in the offensive efficiency and productivity there. However, this offense will probably be bottom 3 at best, bottom 5. Like, this is not going to be a good offensive team. It's going to be bad. However, they will not get blown out in games. I think this team will keep most games close to very close because of their defense. I think that you could be looking at a top 10 defense with this team the way it's put together. They play the game
That would
physically.
be nice to see
It really
in the
would.
city again, man.
Absolutely. They play the game physically and very smart defensively, like you mentioned. And I do think we have a really solid framework for a really good defense here this upcoming season. But the offense, like you said, I really do think we're devoid of an offense here. I do think we're looking at a bottom 5 offense.
Now, with that, the reason I bring that up, with that being said, do you think the Pistons, as composed now, and obviously we'll know more when the season starts, so we'll be able to better project it. But right now, would you say this is a bottom 5 roster in the NBA, or do you think they're going to play up? I'm starting to get worried they're going to play up.
It's so hard to say yes when you've got young guys you know nothing about.
Exactly.
But at the same time, looking at what we know, Blake Griffin at his age, not anywhere near the star he once was. Jeremy Grant. If Jeremy Grant's your best player, you probably have a pretty bad roster.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I probably will say as put together. Because, again, the guys who are going to be doing the production for this organization or for this team are, one, rookies who are unproven, or cast-offs. Mason Plumlees, Josh Jacksons, Ja Okafers, guys like that are cast-offs in this league that really haven't been successful, and those are going to be guys that are big production guys on your roster this year. So, yeah, it probably is a bottom 5 roster put together with what we know. The big wild card being the young guys. You know, are those guys able to boost this roster a little? But as put together,
and guys like Josh Jackson, what young guy?
Right. Yes, but again, the way this roster is put together, from what we know, yes, it's a bottom 5 roster. However, like I said, I think this team, as you mentioned, will play up, and we will see them be a little bit better than what this roster should be because of how they play the game and the way they're coached. Because I think Dwayne Casey's gonna earn a lot of credit for the way this team plays this year.
I'll agree with that. Yeah, because like when you look at it, I'm trying to think about what rosters would be worse than the Pistons, and I'm pretty comfortable saying the Cavs,
the Knicks, the Cavs,
the
maybe.
Knicks. Would you be comfortable saying a team like OKC without Chris Paul now? Do you think he was that big of a factor where they're going to be a bottom 5 roster now?
I don't know. I really like
because their win projections at 24.9, which I feel like is low.
Let me look at the roster.
For comparison, the Pistons win projection is 23.9.
I think that might even be high. Hamidou Diallo, Trevor Ariza, George Hill, Shake.
If we're looking at ESPN win projections, Pistons have the second lowest behind the Cavs.
Okay. No, I'm comfortable saying the Cavs and the Knicks probably have a worse roster. I'm going to say that I think that the Thunder roster might be better than ours. I do think it is.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I think Thunder roster is better than ours. They've got they have some kind of middle of the road guys that are going to play better than some of our guys.
Do you think not having Klay Thompson will put the Warriors back down to where they were last season?
No, I really don't.
Okay.
I don't. I think that team still. I don't think they're able to be as good as they could be, obviously, because not having Klay is a big factor. But if James Wiseman is as good as advertised, and Draymond Green's healthy, and Steph's healthy, and the way that team is, I think they could be a playoff team in the West again this year.
ESPN has them at 31.2. I think that's low.
I think that's probably low. How many games are we playing this year?
70.
70 game season? 72. I think that 31 and a half is low. I think that's low. Where do you see these projections? Can you send that to me? Oh, I just want to do some checking. But do you think the Pistons have a bottom 5 roster?
Yes, I based those two teams you named are the only two that I'm comfortable saying definitively I think are going to be worse than the Pistons. Obviously, things can happen, injuries can happen, teams can be worse, but on paper right now, I think the Pistons, thankfully, are a bottom 5 team and should be in the mix for a top-tier talent in the 2021 draft, which would give us a major boost in this rebuild and could make the 2021-22 season extremely exciting.
I don't disagree. I'm pretty excited about what could be coming for the Pistons in the upcoming draft. I know that
Soggs looked really nice. His first, oh my god.
Yes, I still want Cade Cunningham.
Question is, do you think Cade Cunningham is comfortable playing off ball? If we were to draft him, and let's say Killian Hayes has a really nice season, and we're like, yeah, we're keeping him at point guard.
I don't know.
He's 6'8". He has a size to play the two.
Right. I think what you'll see is a situation like what you've seen with LeBron and the way he's played. Like, he plays off ball at times and he's, does just fine. Then he plays on ball at times. The offense runs through him, and I think Killian Hayes would be able to adjust. I think he's a smart enough player and a solid enough player. I wouldn't have a problem with him adjusting. But I don't know. That's a good question. Could you imagine if the Pistons got the first overall pick 2 years straight and we ended up with Cade Cunningham and... Oh, God, I'm blanking on his name.
Emily Bates?
Emily Bates, yes.
It's assuming Emily Bates is the top pick, but...
I think it's pretty comfortable saying he's the top pick. I mean, he doesn't quite have the hype LeBron had going in, but he's probably one of the most hyped names outside of Lonzo Ball coming into the draft in a long time. And we're still 2 years away.
You'd have a big three right there. If Killian Hayes pans out, you'd have a big three right there.
Oh, that'd be so fun. Mm-hmm. That'd be so fun.
Yep. Well, we are overprojecting.
Yes.
So let's reel it back.
We are looking 3 years down the road, my friend.
All right. So I think we're in agreement that basically what we were saying going into preseason, it still rings true going into the season in terms of this is going to be a much improved defensive team, pretty much devoid of offense, bottom 5 roster. However, a lot more fun to watch.
A lot more fun to watch, and there's going to be some bright spots to look at with this roster that make you excited for the future. That's the key for me is we're going to see things that are exciting to look at. Maybe the production of Josh Jackson and his progression and Killian Hayes developing, Sekou developing. That's the type of stuff I want to see happen, and that's what I'll be excited about. So,
final question.
Yeah. Are
you at all demoralized by the game that Christian Wood had with the Rockets in his first preseason game?
I mean, it hurts. Christian Wood was a guy I would have loved to see the Pistons bring back. Obviously, I loved Christian Wood here. I think he really still fits the mentality the Pistons want to do. But at the same time, I am happy to see him go off and be successful somewhere else, I guess. It
feels like we're the launching pad.
It does.
Feels like we were that boyfriend that, like, you know what? If you love her, let her go and be happy with someone else.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah, 27 points, 10 boards, 2 assists, stealing a block, all in 24 minutes, I believe it was.
Dude's legit. Dude's legit.
Yeah.
I would love to see him in a Pistons uniform again.
I just wanted to throw that in. Just add a little sour note to your podcast.
Oh, man. Anything else to add, brother, before we close out?
That's all I got.
Alrighty, that's going to close it out for this week, guys. Thank you again for listening. We will catch you guys next week. Check out our fantasy fantasy football podcast, The Fanalists, that releases midweek, and we will catch you guys on that as well as next week on this podcast, The Fan Report. Follow us on Twitter at Real Fan Report. Andrew, thank you for joining me, and thank you to Detroit Sports Podcast as well, and thank you to our listeners. We will catch you guys next week. This has been The Fan Report. Bye, fans.
For fans.
Have a good one, guys, and enjoy your week. And happy holidays.
Happy holidays.